Promotion with Love. 13 years ago, being a spy was so incredibly cool. And even the anti-Bonds like Harry Palmer were just very hip. And now the intelligence community is something to be feared.
Do you love spy books, movies, and TV? Then the Spybrary podcast is for you. Since 2017, host Shane Whaley and Spybrary field agents around the world dispatch reviews and interviews with authors, historians, and fellow spy fans. We discuss everything from John le Carré, Len Dayton, Paul Viddich, Graham Greene, Mick Herron, Charles Cumming, Ben McIntyre, and many more. Spybrary is available on all good podcast apps and at spybrary.com.
Hello and welcome to Spybrary episode 270. We bring you a edition of Section F. This is where Spybrarians get together to talk about a spy movie. Joining us again today is Michael Huey. Welcome back to Spybrary, Michael.
Thank you so much, Shane.
We also welcome back John Melville, Jonathan's all the way from Edinburgh in Scotland. Welcome back, Jonathan.
Hey, Shane. Hi, guys.
And a big warm welcome to Pierce Reed, who's making his debut on the show today. He hails from New England. Welcome to Spybrary, Pierce. So we're here to talk about the movie. You picked this one, Pierce, so maybe you would like to introduce it for us. What movie are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about kind of an espionage classic, which is 3 Days of the Condor. One of the really seminal espionage movies out there. It's on every top 10 list, dates back to the early 1970s, and it really sets the stage for a lot of film and a lot of directing and a lot of themes that would follow it for the next really almost 50 years.
Excellent. So we decided, I listened to your feedback about previous Section F episodes, and we realized that quite a few of us haven't watched these movies we're talking about before, and we don't want to obviously ruin them for you, but it's impossible to discuss spy movies, even spy books sometimes, without revealing some twists and turns and spoilers. But what we've decided to do going forward is have the first 10, 15 minutes or so of our episodes just to have a spoiler-free conversation. So we'll give you a taster of this movie, and you'll get a flavor of what it's about and whether it's for you, because ultimately this is what this Section F is all about, is to encourage you to try a movie you've not watched before or rediscover one. And that was certainly the case for me with Condor. I had watched it many years ago. It was a first watch for me. Michael, what about you? Was it a first watch, or how many times?
Just a second watch. I watched it for the first time, I'd say 3 or 4 years ago. And I liked it very much then. But it benefits from a second watch, no question.
Yeah. How about you, Jonathan?
I've seen it a couple of times before, so much so I thought I owned it on DVD. So I was actually searching for it, and I don't think I ever did buy it. So I don't know where I saw it, but it's just one of those films, along with I think some other ones that we will talk about, like maybe The Parallax View and things like that are, there's a little sort of group of films with this sort of vibe and this sort of feeling. So yeah, no, I'm very much a fan of it, even though I've only seen it maybe 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, absolutely. And how about you, Pierce? How many times have you watched it? Because I know this definitely wasn't your first time.
I would have to say dozens.
Dozens,
and it's
okay.
an interesting perspective, because the first time I watched it was as a high school student, barely 10 years after it had come out. This would have been probably 1981 or 2 when it would have appeared on TV, and then later rented it back when we could get Betamax and VHS tapes from the local video store. And it was one some friends and I watched and was absolutely blown away by it then, and I'm still blown away every time I see it now.
So for those who haven't seen it, what kind of spy movie is it? Is it a loner on the run? Is it a team mission? Is it a bureaucratic chess game? So what I'm asking is it more action-packed like Bourne and Bond, or more of a slow burn like a Le Carré?
Well, all three of the categories that you mentioned are sort of present in the film. The bureaucratic backdealing, the man on the run, the everyman turned into a spy unwittingly. But it's very much more of a slow burn with punctuated by some action sections that are not really what you would be used to in a Bourne movie or in a shoot 'em up car chase kind of movie. Much more in line with a Tinker Tailor soldier spy than anything Bourne.
Excellent. Would you guys agree with that, or?
Yeah, I think it's Hitchcockian more than anything. It very much fits in with kind of North by Northwest, 39 Steps. It's, Pierce was saying, lone guy on the run. But it's a smart screenplay. I think it's a really smart screenplay. There are some quotable lines from this film. But yeah, definitely not Bourne or Bond, not at all.
Yeah. So, Pierce, as you've watched this dozens of times, can you give a quick, in a nutshell, what's this movie about? Obviously, without revealing spoilers for those who aren't familiar with it, and then we can get into the meat of the movie.
I'll give a good lead off on it because if I go too deeply into it, it will spoil it. And unlike a lot of things that now I guess you'd call predictable, there are some really unpredictable twists and turns in this. It's one of the things that makes it very, very interesting. The background is that a small group of espionage CIA agency employees work at an out-of-the-way research facility in New York City, established in a brownstone called, I believe, the American Literary Society, something that pretty much guarantees no one's going to knock on the door and ask what's going on. And what they do is they read everything that is published, analyze it for material that might lead to um, espionage penetrations in the US, that might give ideas to the spy agencies, that might lead them to cracking codes or coming up with things that might present a threat to America. In fact, the concept was so realistic that the Soviet Union actually created their own version of it after the movie came out, which is a fun aside. In running sort of their day-to-day operations, the actual office is attacked. One does not know who or why it was attacked, but the staff of the office, with the exception of Robert Redford, who you clearly can't kill off in the first few scenes, is killed off, leaving him alone in New York and trying to figure out both what happened and to save his own life against the forces that are arrayed against him. And I think if I go too much further beyond that, I start to get into some spoilers.
Yes,
But
which we don't want to do
what you
that.
think might be the direction it's heading really doesn't turn out into the directions it's heading. Again, very Le Carré-like and quite cerebral.
So, again, being mindful of not giving spoilers, Jonathan, what was your first reaction when the credits were over, when the credits rolled, you'd watched this movie? How did you feel about it?
You mean, how did I feel right at the end of it?
Yes.
Wow, okay, that's a good question. Well, I think it's politically it's lasted well. I think it's still relevant, I should say. And I think watching it now, I think that could almost almost happen now. Again, not spoiling what happens in the last scene. I think the last scene actually does give you a little bit of pause for thought, just as much as the rest of the film. So
We're definitely going to tuck into that later on, because that's
yeah,
definitely Spoilerville. So
totally. But so yeah, so I think based on the whole film, it's a film I really enjoy, and I think we'll get into a bit more detail why. But yeah, I just think it's a really rewarding watch. I mean, it's a cliche to say it makes you think, but it kind of does. And but yeah, to say too much more, I think would
Yes.
be spoilers. But also, I'll just say, I mean, we might be touching on this anyway. But when you mentioned sort of credits there, I was almost thinking about the opening titles when we see the character of Taylor coming through the traffic. So I don't know if we're going to be talking about that sort of, just the
yeah, we can get into that.
introduced to it.
Well,
So I just think the way we're introduced to our lead character right at the start is really fascinating.
And
sitting in this.
it's so disarming because as he's coming through traffic, uh, again, not a spoiler, but he's riding a moped. And there are a few things absolutely less spy hero like than watching your lead character putting through New York on a 100-mile-per-gallon moped as he heads to his literary society.
Are you on the hunt for your next thrilling spy read? Look no further. Spybury contributor and Sunday Times chief political commentator Tim Shipman has curated a list of his top 125 spy authors ranked. This list includes both classic and modern writers, making it the ultimate guide for any spy fan. Tim also recommends which book to try first from each author, and he shares his favourite book from each of them too, so you can dive right into the best of the best. Head over to spybury.com/top125 to grab your free copy now. Don't miss out on the ultimate spy reading list.
Yeah, and it's kind of playful as well. I think the film at the start is sort of playful because you don't know where it's going. And even just with the titles when they're coming up and the names of I think it's maybe the actors or the crew, but they kind of Redford's character is right in the middle of them. So it's just kind of this funny way, almost humorous, and that opening 10 minutes or so is quite sort of lighter. The music is kind of lighter. So it's so I think it sets things up really well. And yes, as you're saying there, Pierce, about being on his moped with his little woolly hat on. I mean, that's something again. What I'm sure we will get into is the actor that they chose as the lead, and I won't speak too much more about that. But just to say, I think that vision, that image, doesn't make me think of Robert Redford, and I think that's just a slight issue, I suppose, that I have with the film in general, but it's not a major criticism. It's just more a comment or something we can talk about.
Definitely. How about you, Michael? How was the movie for you?
Yeah, I think it's very smart movie, well directed. Sidney Pollack is a really solid director. I like the cast. I agree with what these guys are saying about Robert Redford. You sort of have to goof him up a little bit. I mean, this is the Sundance Kid and Jeremiah Johnson. I mean, Robert Redford, probably the best looking man alive in 1975. So you got to make him look a little strange on a moped with that hat. It's a great movie. I will say there is one major plot point, major, and we can talk about this later, where your mileage may vary. That's something you kind of have to go with, I think. I think some folks, it's like, oh, okay, that happened. I think for some folks seeing it, it might be kind of I'm not sure if I buy that or not.
Yeah.
So
you're doing a great job of teasing our listeners who are not familiar with the movie now to go and rent it, stream it, whatever. So I think we've done our job here, and excellent. So we're going to move into spoilers now. So if you haven't watched the movie, hit pause, go get it, watch it, and then please come back and join us. And we'd love to have you as we dig deeper into this. So, Pierce, was there a moment when you just thought this has just become a great movie? Because you're talking about this slow start, right? So okay, this is a bit weird and very pedestrian and slow build and soft. And there must have been at some point in that movie you thought, oh, this is going to be top notch for you.
Yeah, and I think it's the way the movie went from 5 miles an hour to 200 miles an hour very unexpectedly. And this would be the arrival of the postman, the very symbol in the 1970s of sort of benign and positive government, the friendly mailman with his mailbag, who shows up with a suppressed Ingram and runs through the office like a threshing machine through the wheat. That is a really shocking opening, especially when you had one of the staff people who realized what was about to happen to her, the calm way she was asked, please move away from the window, and saying, I'm not going to scream. That was really unprecedented stuff in the early 1970s when it came to any kind of a spy thriller, maybe with the exception of a wild James Bond or something. But you weren't set up to expect this.
How about you, Jonathan? Was there a scene in the movie where you're like, okay, I'm into this, I'm sold?
I think as soon as we see the car parked across the street and the office is being watched, that's when it started to get something's happening here. And then, of course, as Pierce says, I think when the baddies go into the Joubert
Yeah.
goes into the building with those guys and just systematically starts killing everybody, and you think, oh blimey, what's this? And you talk there, Pierce, about the kind of going from five miles an hour, which I guess is almost like the moped, isn't it? It's like the moped is that's what it's like on that. He's puttering along, the film's sort of puttering a little bit, and then it just takes off, and he gets into a Ferrari or something. But no, really, I think when that happens, and then of course when Redford comes back, and then you start to realise, you think, is he going to be framed for it? And that, I mean, that's something I love this is just one of those genres that I do love, which is kind of, it's a few different, you could call it a few different things, but definitely that man on the run, or the innocent on the run, or the sort of man being chased, and we've got all those so many films like that, even down to things like The Fugitive, which is not a spy film, but again, it's sort of a man on the run, and I just adore The Fugitive as well. So no, I think as soon as that happened, that's when I was like, all right, so how's he going to get out of this one?
Yeah. It's very interesting you bring up Man on the Run. What do you think is the attraction for us of that kind of story or plot line? 'Cause it's not just movies, right? I mean, I think immediately of Eric Ambler and many others, where you've got the everyman who's suddenly caught up in something much bigger than him. What is it about that we enjoy so much, do you think, Jonathan?
I think it's maybe it's partly putting yourself in their shoes. I think, for me anyway, I think it's that thing of when you mentioned they're the everyman. That is every man or every person. That's us, really, isn't it? And I think it's that, okay, this is a film star, a movie star, but actually they're in trouble, and I can put myself in those shoes. And what would I do? And I think this film has a lot of that. It's what would I do if I was in that situation? And there's some things you think, oh, that's genius, and others it's like, what is he up to? So, yeah, I think it's that just fish out of water, that kind of what's going to happen next. It's so great.
I love that, Jonathan. But, I don't think what would I do, because I read these books, watch these movies. I know I'd be bloody useless.
Well, you'd have a go, wouldn't you? You'd obviously,
I'd like to think so. Like, that's the thing, though. You're right. It's like, right now going, I probably wouldn't fight anymore here. I wouldn't jump out the windows. But you don't know what that fear is, or that, like, I've got to get out of here, and I think probably you're right. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I think, well, the good news for librarians especially is that Turner's superpower in this movie is reading.
Yes.
Right? That's how he knows all of this stuff, is he reads everything. I think this movie gives us two sort of normal people characters, because Faye Dunaway's character is very much in that light as well. And she's, forced at gunpoint to be in the story. But it's just, I mean, and you see it. I mean, the Man from U.N.C.L.E. used to always have one or two people who were just normal people who had everyday jobs that, were somehow caught up with Ilya and Napoleon. Here, of course, it's a very different tone, obviously, but it's just effective, because the job of any good story, whether it's a novel or a film or TV show, is to make you empathize with the characters. And what better way?
Absolutely.
And I would add to that it's not just one or two people who are the everyman. As you go through the plot, the term, to me, the banality of evil that came up at the end of Nuremberg, everybody in that appears relatively normal. It's bureaucracies. Even Joubert is just this sort of very calm, relaxed guy who goes about his rather evil job, and in his spare time paints fusiliers. Everybody in that is not a James Bond supervillain or somebody living in a hollowed out mountain. They're somebody that you can almost relate to as pushing papers, and in this case, the papers just happen to lead in somewhat bad places.
So, Pierce, can you walk us through, especially for members of our younger members of our audience, what was going on in America at the time this movie came out? What was the mindset of the nation?
Yeah, that's a really important thing to the movie plot and to the reception. To how much of it is still here? I think it was John that said it still sort of resonated as something that could happen today. But at the time, the U.S. had just come out of Watergate. They had what were called the Church Committee hearings, where the Central Intelligence Agency was made to reveal the quote unquote family jewels, uh, all of their plots against Castro, all of the mistakes of Vietnam, the things that led to books like Legacy of Ashes. So the nation was in a very cynical mood about government in general. If you compare this to another everyman film like North by Northwest, the government is the benign protector, the wonderful overwatchers who are preventing the evil Russians or Soviets or communists from stealing the secrets. In this case, the government is sort of the bad guy, leading to, not giving away too much of a spoiler, even though we're in spoiler country,
I think you
we,
can now. This is for
we
people
come
who've watched
through
it.
the
You can.
oil shocks of the 1970s, the formation of OPEC, people for the first time standing in gas lines, the concern about the Middle East that was going on in the mid 1970s between the 6 Day War, the arrival of Mideastern terrorism and Palestinian organizations. And if you compare the book to the movie, the book actually was significantly rewritten, not just from 3 to 6 days, but it was from a drug plot based in Vietnam to a plot that really revolved around global oil supplies. For people who were standing in gas lines when this movie came out, or recently had been, it was just a kick, like, wow, this is what's going on. So I think that's a little bit lost today, but I think we're a lot more cynical, so we embrace it a little bit more.
Do you think that the movie stands up, John, today?
Yeah, definitely. And I think like some of the best films, it's kind of it's a historic. I think the fact it's a historical document in a way, and that's something that I find fascinating is watching, because there's a lot going on here. You know, the whole New York setting. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to go off on a tangent here, but I do think.
No, you can. You can.
Well,
it's Section
just,
F. You can.
I just think that looking at New York, in its, well, would you call it its heyday? I think certainly from a film point of view, it looks its best. That grimy, certainly from a
Jack.
UK point of view. I don't know what New Yorkers think, but
Maybe
certainly,
maybe some noir film in there from the 1970s.
yeah. So there's kind of that, but also I just think yes, that whole what's been really interesting, and of course I knew bits and pieces about what was happening at the time, and certainly the whole kind of Nixon side of things and Watergate, and then the whole CIA, was it the Church Committee that you mentioned, or the Church, and that's and something I read earlier was talking about how, you know, cinema goers, when this film came out, were almost walking out of the cinema and, you know, picking up a newspaper from one of those brilliant stands that they have in the street that we don't have here, and reading about, you know, revelations from their own government that were happening on the same day, and it just must have been pretty amazing to sort of feel like you were almost living in the film. So no, I
Glad
definitely.
you brought that up.
Yeah.
No, but I'm glad you brought it, because for me, it was like, we're going to talk about characters in a moment, but for me, New York City is a character in this movie. And when you see the World Trade Center still up, and, you know, and the foyer, I believe they filmed in the foyer, which I remember going in there to get tickets with United years ago. And that was like, that's a time capsule. I found it quite jarring, actually, when I saw it. Crikey, you know, I wasn't expecting that. So I think you're right. And like you, I love that. I mean, we both think like the Sweeney as well, right? 70s UK. You go to some of those areas that were in the 70s in the Sweeney, they looked awful. They're lovely now, or on Notting Hill. I mean, those houses go for millions. And I think the same thing in New York City. You know, I used to love watching Kojak for the same reason. You know, it's a very gritty Manhattan that was a rough old place at the time, wasn't it, Pierce and Michael?
Apparently. Yeah, but at least it didn't have Max von Sydow in real life, lurking around. Yeah, I agree completely that dirty old New York is part of the appeal of these movies. But I think this movie really falls in lines with, as Jonathan said earlier, the kind of paranoid conspiracy thrillers of the 70s, and the ending is so 1970s New Hollywood, paranoia post Nixon, that ambiguous ending. I mean, I'd love to hear, Pierce, what you think about the very last shot, since we're into the spoiler
Yeah.
zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a whole list of movies that started to sort of come out at that time, where you went from going to the movie to feel good and watch Fred Astaire and come away feeling great, to where you were coming away with more questions than answers. Chinatown was not far off from that. The absolute Jack Nicholson classic, with an ending that was, I won't spoil it, but you just sort of go, wow. The French Connection, Serpico, these were all sort of the New York movies, but also the movies that changed how people interact with entertainment, and how entertainment was now used to push messages. And it translated into TV, I think, very much in the 1980s, starting with television shows like Hill Street Blues, where it wasn't just sort of Dragnet, we catch the bad guy. I think one of the masters of it was Michael Mann in Miami Vice, that just did some wonderfully, ironic and terrific plots and endings and so forth. But yeah, absolutely, it was a whole sea change in how Hollywood is interacting with its audiences.
Do
I
you
think it's
think
also
that
interesting. I'm sorry, Shane, but it's interesting that this was 75, 3 Days of the Condor. All the President's Men is 76, where Redford plays the guy who helped to sort of, expose
Bob Woodward.
Watergate. And here he is sort of playing almost a deep throat like character, a whistleblower, essentially, if this article is actually published in the New York Times.
So let's talk about the casting then, because we brought up earlier on Robert Redford. How was he for you in this role? What did you think of the casting of this actor for this character?
Well, I suppose I was sort of alluding to it earlier. And much as I think he's great, and I think he's a great actor, there's just a few points. I think just starting on that bike at the start, and I'm thinking, oh, where's Robert Redford be cycling down? And this is the thing. I think of Robert Redford rather than the character a little bit with this
Yeah.
one. So a few times in it, and it just sort of slightly jarred, and I thought, I think he's meant to be, and of course he's wearing glasses, which is supposed to be,
Yeah.
suppose show that he's not just a good-looking guy or something. He's got brains. But so no, I think he's good. But is he miscast? I'm not sure. I mean, I think he does really. He is obviously a huge part of this film's success and why it works. So I'm a bit torn on that one. I don't want to say he's definitely not bad. It's just I think you could have had someone, and maybe in a lower budget, I guess, in a non. There's versions of this film where he's just kind of a more everyday kind of guy, I think.
Yeah.
And I would kind of like to see that version. And I think there's mentioning a TV version, I think, that exists, which I've not watched. And I don't know what they do with that one, but no, he's good, but maybe slightly miscast. I don't know what other people think about that.
Pierce?
I think he's kind of the right guy for the job. He does, yes, he's good looking, Robert Redford. It does add maybe a little bit of believability to the Faye Dunaway relationship, maybe a little. But I think also, to look at his evolution, you got to look at the pairing of Sidney Pollack and Robert Redford and the movie they'd just done a year earlier, where he had some of the same evolutions, starting as the greenhorn that gets off of the boat to try and escape war and escape society, and completely at a loss for how to survive in the wilderness, and then he grows into Jeremiah Johnson, the legendary mountain man. So I think the casting there was not just because Robert Redford was the right guy for the job, but because you had a director actor pairing where knew they could really make a great film together. And they'd go on to make more. Out of Africa and The Electric Horseman were huge hits.
And I guess at the time he was a big name, right? So it's, you stick his name on the poster and people are going to come through the door to watch it. So the commercial reasons to it as well, I imagine.
And speaking of the poster, I mean, the poster is Redford and Dunaway in a clinch with the CIA logo behind them.
Is it really?
Yeah. So, I mean, the romance is what, marketing wise, is what got people into the theater, or at least some of them, right? I think we look at it differently now. But I do think that was a big, big selling point. I don't know when The Way We Were was, but, Redford was, a romantic lead as well as sort of the rugged, outdoors type like he was in Jeremiah Johnson or in Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid.
You look at films today and everything's based off of a franchise model. Where do producers put their money? They put them in Harry Potter or Jason Bourne or something that's Marvel, because franchises and numbers 1, 2, 3 through 37 Fast and Furious make money. Back in the 1970s, there was still star power. There was still the attraction of, if you put Faye Dunaway and Robert Redford in something, you're going to get an audience. That was a safe bet. They based where they were going not on a script necessarily, but on who they were going to put together. And I think that becomes a big part of why they marketed it the way they did.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that whole romance, I've not really given the romance much thought, to be honest, because I just don't feel it's the strongest part. So I suppose that's what I'm trying to say, really. I mean, I think it doesn't quite work. I don't know if Michael was sort of alluding to the way that he does coerce her into doing things, these days. You could have a go at it. I don't think it would go down as well as that, but so there's that, which is more a sort of modern sensibility of going, I don't know about that. But even just trying to put myself in it just doesn't quite work for me, I suppose. I mean, that the sort of love scene that they have is clearly just put in there for the viewer, just for, that's maybe titillation, but there's not too much going on really. It's pretty tame, but it just slows everything down for me, and I think it adds a bit too much time, just pads things out a little bit. So, but maybe that's just as someone who just wants, we've got this kind of motion in the film that we've talked about. It took a little bit to get going, and then it gets going, and then it sort of slows down for this, and you're like, okay, what are we doing with this? But hey, that's my take on it. It's just, Faye Dunaway is a little bit wasted in it, I think, as well. I think she's good, but just not the strongest character, really. As much as she helps out, and of course, without her, the plot would not really work, I suppose, because she gets them to places and helps out. But just that romance doesn't quite work for me.
Jonathan, I have to commend you. In 270 episodes of the show of Spybury, we've never had a guest say the word titillation before, so that's a Spybury first. Michael.
Sorry, it's a bit extreme. It's a bit extreme, that word. You might have to put a language warning on the...
It's in the dictionary, though, isn't it? I'm sure.
I think so.
Well, I think Faye Dunaway has the best line in this movie, which, if I say it, will probably be the first time that word has been said in the Spybury podcast as well. I think maybe... I think they try to make it make sense. To me, the problems are two things. Number one, he kidnaps her and then he ties her up for several hours, comes back, and they end up having sex. And the reason that is because he sees her. He sees her photographs. He sees she's lonely. They are kindred spirits in that they're both hiding something. But then the morning after, she's like, well, what do you need, pal? I'm I'm on the team. You want me to go into the CIA headquarters and, sit down in this restaurant opposite this potentially scary, Cliff Robertson character?
Yeah.
I'm down. Let's go. And that it's a naturalistic movie. Faye Dunaway is not glammed up at all. Redford is not glammed up either. They're wearing, what feel to me like very sort of realistic clothing for the period, and it's written that way. And so to me, that just grates because of, if for no other reason, that it just doesn't quite work in the plot. It's not very believable. And their goodbye, which is, at the train station, and Redford walks off into the steam of the departing train, is just a little, it's subtly romantic, but it still kind of doesn't quite work with the rest of this film, I think.
Yeah. It doesn't ruin the film, is what I would say, but it is disappointing. And I just got the feeling at that point, oh, this is a movie by numbers. You got to have the love scene, you got to have the girl, you got to have this, etc. And it's a shame because the rest of the movie is absolutely superb, isn't it? So I forgive it.
I was gonna mention too. It's also one of the places where it varies very significantly off James Grady's original book, which was 6 Days of the Condor. Gives a lot more time for character development, and the character in the book is really not a Faye Dunaway type, so there's much more time to evolve how things sort of work. But I agree with everybody's assessment that that's kind of a weak point in the film, and as characters go, it's a distraction, not really a enhancement to an otherwise really solid plot.
Would you recommend then that people read the book? Is it one you recommend?
That one's really hard. I would say reading it first versus after is not going to be like some where you really spoil it. I only recently read the book for the first time earlier this year, and actually loved it, and had so many different variances off the plot from beginning to end that really when they wrote the screenplay, and Grady was involved in the screenplay, they were writing for 1975 and a movie audience. He was writing for a book audience. It was his first book. He wrote it in 74 or 73, and it went right to movie. I mean, an amazing moment in his life because he was a very young fellow. The book and movie are chalk and cheese, so you can enjoy them both. And I sort of understood the Faye Dunaway character more after reading the book, but it still doesn't quite do it for me in the movie.
So no conversation about this movie could be complete without discussion of Joubert. I'm going to ask you, Jonathan, how was he for you, the villain, the assassin?
He was fascinating. It's a shame we don't get to see. I think what was most interesting was that kind of final conversation, the final 5-10 minutes or so that happens with Redford, Turner. I think that whole sequence really explains a lot, of course, about who he is and the fact that he is a kind of, he's a hired hand, and he's just doing his job, and no malice against Redford, and that's really interesting. And of course, you have to build up the sinister side of him, but there's also that moment where he's in the. I'm just thinking about the moment in the lift, in the elevator, when he sort of picks up the glove and puts it on the side and smiles, and at the time I'm thinking, well, that's him putting on an act for that situation, which I suppose he kind of is, but at the same time I think maybe that's the sort of real character, because the one that we meet at the end is just a bit more relaxed about things, and he's just, this is just what I do, nothing against you, whereas the rest of the film is very much, who is this sinister man? And so of course they have to do that, otherwise if he was just some goofy guy that's smiling all the time, it wouldn't work. And but so I think it's really quite an interesting character that they have. That is it two sides? I'm not sure it's quite two sides, but just that we see the different aspects to him as a guy doing his job, and giving him advice at the end as well. And that's great. I love that when he's like, "Here's the gun," because for that moment. So in a way, he does get. Does he steal? He almost steals the film. Actually, I think now I think about it, because it's such a really strong scene, or a couple of scenes at the end there.
I actually pulled up the line here because I agree that it really resonates when Joubert says to Turner, "You have not much future there. It will happen this way. You may be walking, maybe the first sunny day of the spring, and a car will slow beside you and a door will open, and someone you know, maybe even trust, will get out of the car, and he will smile, a becoming smile, but he will leave, open the door of the car and offer to give you a lift." It's like, wow.
He's been there, isn't he, that guy? Joubert
Yeah.
has been there. He's been probably the guy getting out of the car.
And go on, Pierce.
I was going to say, I think one of the fascinating parts about him, you mentioned, John, that he's, two-sided. I sort of see him as no-sided. There is almost nothing about him. He is the perfect gray man. The only clue to his background really is when Robert Redford is describing him and says the accent, German, maybe from the Alsace area. Opens an entire Pandora's box of background, right? Given his age, that would have put him right in the middle of a very ugly German government in the 1940s. Again, a common theme being brought up in a lot of movies during that time period. From the Odessa files through the Boys from Brazil, all of that, what happened to all of these bad Nazis. And the less they talk about him, the less they show you about him, the more sinister he becomes. And I think that, again, the wonderful disarming moment is the epitome of evil when he's got nothing better to do, sits in his hotel room and paints toy soldiers. Such an amazing contrast, and beautifully played by von Sydow.
Superb. Michael, how was Joubert for you and von Sydow as the actor?
Yeah, I think he's one of those actors you can turn the camera on and he has immediate gravitas and menace, if he wants to be, right? I mean, he's so good in the Quiller Memorandum, which really is a movie that we should discuss here at some point one day.
Definitely.
And I may have a cold take that I think he is probably the best cinematic Blofeld in a very disappointing James Bond movie. But yeah, I agree with what Pearson and Jonathan said. To me, he really, I do think he's a little bit different than most assassins we've seen in these spy films. And when he talks about it brings him peace, and he says it's about the precision of the work is what brings him peace. It's not personal. It's about the precision. And I think that's a really good line. I think for a killer, he is especially well written.
I keep going back to that advice he gets. I agree with you, by the way, 100%, but I keep going back. He's advising. Is there you Pierce, correctly, you said, call him as a grey man, as almost nothing, but why would he give that advice if he was just a grey man? There must be something within him that may have taken a shine to Turner or felt sorry for Turner. Why would he give that advice? And of course, I wonder what your take is on that.
I think he saw Turner as a natural talent, and somebody who could be perhaps a protege, or somebody who, with no future in America, might follow in his footsteps. There's definitely a really strange sort of father-son thing going on there by the end.
So we mentioned lines. What are some of the favorite lines in this movie for you? I'll start with you, Pierce.
Well, one character we really haven't touched on is the character of Mr. Wabash, who one assumes is the CIA director. In the book, he was a sort of an outsider consultant, the old man who comes in for advice. And there's a wonderful exchange between Higgins, who is Cliff Robertson, who really is the bad guy in all of this, where they're talking about the old days of the OSS. I sailed the Adriatic with a movie star, and he says, "Do you miss the action?" And he says, "No, I miss the clarity." And I think that's one of the huge things that sums up films like 3 Days of the Condor, also sort of the 1970s, where you went from a very black and white America to many, many shades of gray. The post-Vietnam period, when it came to foreign policy, military, entertainment, everything was going from this Eisenhower era black and white to really not sort of trusting where things were, to the shades of gray. I think that line sums up the film and is just a brilliant characterization. And John Houseman is fantastic in the movie, even though it's just a tiny, tiny part.
Agreed. What about you, Michael? Is there a line that stood out for you?
Yeah, the one Pierce just talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great line.
Not the Faye Dunaway line
Well,
that you're too nervous to repeat?
again, I think that is the best line in the movie. And I do think there are some lines between her and Redford that are so interesting and oblique. They're parting when they're talking about the guy waiting for her in Vermont, and he says, "Is he tough?" And he says, "Well, he'll understand." Oh, yeah, that's tough. And I want to go, I'm not getting that. Maybe Pierce, you and I can talk when this is over and you can explain that bit to me. Because I was going, what is going on here between them? But yeah, that line, that scene between Cliff Robertson and John Houseman just sort of plays up, our last film, Promotion with Love, 13 years ago, being a spy was so incredibly cool. And even the anti-Bonds like Harry Palmer were just very hip. And now the intelligence community is something to be feared.
Absolutely. Jonathan, I know I've sprung this question, but was there a line or a quote?
I think I'm going to cop out a little bit and just say the one that we've been talking about with the, someone's going to get out of the car one day and someone and yeah, I just think that's quite a memorable moment.
The one that screamed out to me, and I think I want it on my gravestone is, "I am not a field agent. I read books." And he's on that call.
That is you. That's you, definitely.
Yeah. Pierce?
The one thing I was going to say is the last line in the film and Robert Redford's reaction to it when he said, "But what if they don't print it?" And you've got Redford's facial expression, the Salvation Army band behind him. I'm sure that wasn't an accident. 3 Days of the Condor is a Christmas movie, by the way. What if they don't print it? And basically that's the end. And that left everybody hanging because you don't know now where it's going to go. Is he going to have to leave America? The other piece of that last line was it was the fulfillment of Joubert's prophecy. A car pulled up, a smiling face got out, and the conversation begun. It wasn't, Redford did have a gun in his belt and made him walk, but it was sort of as it played out. But what if they don't print it was absolutely a great ending.
Yeah, absolutely. How was the ending for you, Michael?
Oh, I love it. I mean, yeah, I love those 70s ambiguous downer endings. Yeah, I don't see how else you could have ended it. If it was, the next day and the New York Times is rolling off the press and there's the story, it would have been very disappointing. Conversely, if, the guy got out of the car and we hear a gunshot and screen goes to black, that would have been bad too. So I like the way it ends.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, thought it was great. Love as Michael says, love an ambiguous ending. I think, totally different, but I'm just going to throw it in anyway. Long Good Friday, that end. That's another spoiler zone, but that ending, it's like we kind of know what's happened. we pretty much know what's going to happen, but it might not. Yeah, I think that sort of is perfect that someone come up with that idea of just pausing it there.
Yeah, I think so too. I really like that ending, and that's why I was kind of asking earlier on. Maybe I phrased it wrong. When the credits went up, what did we think? What was the reaction? It was like, oh wow, that when we beat the bad guys or whatever. And obviously, this movie is so very different because I kind of thought that's it. I was waiting for more, which is great, isn't it? Really, for a movie.
And it's great that they didn't do a sequel because it looks so easy. It could have been almost so easy to do that sequel, because the cliffhanger ending. Yeah, what happens next? So I'm glad they didn't, and then let us down. 4 days. What would that be? 4 days of the Condor.
6 Days of the Condor was the book, and I won't spoil that, but the ending of that had absolutely nothing to do with the New York Times. So again, enjoy the book. It is a good read. And I also recommend a more recent book that Grady did called Condor the Day After, which isn't really a sequel book. It actually talks more about his life after Condor. It's very fascinating, and I hope, Shane, we can get James Grady onto Spybrary, because his book is just terrific.
No, we should do that. And I know that I saw a photograph of him with a friend of the show, I.S. Berry, a couple of weeks ago at an event in DC. So maybe we can do that and interview him. It would actually be quite fun to bring James Grady on with I.S. Berry, who worked for the agency as well, right? I don't know if she'd be up for that. Might be a bit too near the bone.
Can we get Robert Redford as well, maybe? Is he available?
Michael Frostbeckner, another friend of Spybrary, great support of ours. He wrote Spy Games. So, what do you fancy that one, John? I've done Gary Oldman now, right? It's all old hat to me, but he might give us more than 4 minutes as well.
We should try, definitely.
Maybe that should be our goal, right? Let's have a lofty goal of let's get Robert Redford on Section F. There we go.
And he could talk, we actually discussed it on Spybrary a couple of years ago on the forum, and Michael Beckner kind of came in and said, no, there's no validity to this. But a lot of sort of fans look at the Robert Redford trilogy of 3 Days of the Condor, Sneakers, where he sort of reemerges as a former hacker / intelligent guy. Brilliant movie, by the way, from the early 1990s. And of course, Spy Game as kind of the Robert Redford career spy trilogy. And podcast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have to go and watch it. Piers, you sent me something. I'll ask it this way. Was the CIA actually involved in this film?
So there was a really interesting article that I came across. It was in an article from a 1970s movie magazine, and it was called Jump Cut, I believe. And they talked about the CIA director being on set at the filming of the movie. And there's actually a photograph of him sitting with Robert Redford or Sidney Pollack at the time. There had been rumors that Robert Redford hired him to as a consultant, or Sidney Pollack did. The reality is that Pollack was sort of concerned about portrayal of the agency. Was there, in this post-Church Committee era, going to be any blowback, any thing that they would try and stifle the movie or something? And they brought in the CIA director to watch the filming and watch it progress for a day and talk and ask questions and so forth. And the director at the time, the CIA director, was actually the former CIA director. He'd resigned and had been made special ambassador to, I believe it was Iran. And so he had a lot of really interesting background in the whole oil shock and the things that became plot elements in the movie. So in likelihood, he probably did not do a lot of input, but he would have certainly been an interesting guy to talk to about plot twists and so forth. And it's a really neat photograph.
And that was Dick Helms, right?
Yes, Richard Helms.
So how often was he in, sorry, how often, how long was he director for? What years was he active?
Early
Or was he
1970s.
still active when they filmed the movie?
He had just left the agency. So he had been
Got it.
active
Okay.
in the latter days, if I remember, of Vietnam, and was part of the sort of, for lack of a better word, cleanup crew and trying to get
Yes.
things sort of back in order. And I don't believe he was succeeded by Stansfield Turner. I believe he came 2 or 3 years later. But Turner made massive changes in the agency, but it was Helms' relationship, I think, with the oil shock that could have been the most interesting
Yeah.
tie. But I don't think he was heavily involved in anything other than coming on, taking a look at things and going, "Oh, this is how movies are done."
Got it. That's fascinating, though, isn't it? Especially see that picture, especially with the whole conspiracy thing, and then you see Richard Helms on the set. I find it fascinating. All right, I am going to start with you, Michael. You can go first this time.
Oh.
So 5 trench coats is absolutely top notch, premier crew, superb. Where are you scoring this one?
I think for Spribrarians, this would be absolutely 4 trench coats.
Yeah.
As a spy film, it has aged very well. I mean, there's stuff at the end I think that feels very much like today's world. You know, the relationship, as we've talked about, has aged poorly, but if you're a spy fan, you cannot pass up 3 Days with Condor.
Am I right in thinking it would have been a 5 apart from the plot, or still not quite there for you?
Yeah, probably a 4.5. You know, without that, I think it's strong. As I said, it's a really good script, and I think the acting is good, and Pollock is a perfect director for this.
Yeah. Jonathan, what about yourself?
I think I would be tempted to give it 5, based on that kind of where does it fit in that, among its contemporaries, really, just whether that's other spy films or other 70s films. I think I would want people to watch it, so I think I would say 5, because it is so good. I mean, yes, there are these flaws, but they're really minor and just us being picky, I think, or certainly for me, I shouldn't speak for everyone else, but for me, the romance thing, yeah, it's a little bit, but as a whole, I think I can forgive that and give it a 5.
Wow. Okay, so that's a bold 5 offer there. Well, we'll keep a tally of these. We'll review them at the end of the year. Piers, how about yourself, sir?
I've got to go with a 5 out of 5 on this one as well. Again, the romance angle of it takes a little bit away from the believability, but I think that's more than made up by the way the plot takes such a cerebral path through spurts of action and irony and just some really amazing themes and politics and whatnot of the time. I think some of our younger Spribrarians may be a little less kind of blown away by it because we got more of a diet of that kind of film today, but also because you have to be a bit of an historian to know what was going on and what made that film so utterly relevant at the time. I still think it's aged really well, and if you look up the top 5, top 10, top 25 spy movies on any list, it's there. So that says something. There've been a lot of spy movies in the last 50 years. If it didn't get knocked off its pedestal it's probably here to stay.
I appreciate that, and I think if we had longer, I might challenge you a little bit on the perception of the younger viewer, because we've had the Snowden files, and we had stuff in the UK recently that was all hushed up, and so this stuff keeps going on. So whilst you're quite right with Vietnam and Watergate and the oil crisis, etc., I think young people will probably be more tuned into conspiracies. In some ways, that's quite sad. But for me, it's a 5, and I judge the trench coat score by, would I watch it again? Yeah, I'd go and watch it tonight again. It wouldn't bother me. I would enjoy
Same
it.
here.
Maybe, yeah. And if someone said to me, recommend a quintessential Spybury type of movie, and I'm like, okay, well, I think you mentioned earlier on, or maybe you did, Pierce, about if you like Tinker Tailor, you'd like this, and there's other movies like The Conversation, and whatever. I'm like, yeah, if you like that style of slow burn, but with some action and plenty of tension, because ultimately this is a thriller. And again, Michael, you said it's for spy fans, but I think even non-spy fans who just want a good thriller, because constantly you're like, how's he going to get out of this, and who's after him, and how on earth do you take on the whole system on your own, and using his own resources. So maybe it is one for non-spy fans as well. I can't answer that, obviously, but for me it is a strong 5. So Pierce, thank you very much for suggesting that we tackle this one early doors on Section F, and we've covered some absolute classics, and really pleased that this one is up there. And gentlemen, I'm sorry we overrun, but I thought I was being ambitious saying 45 minutes for a movie of this caliber. But we probably could have gone another hour as well, couldn't we, with all our various observations. And I thank you very much for coming on to Spybury once again, giving up some of your Sunday afternoon, sharing your knowledge, and also to our viewers on YouTube. What do you agree with our scores? Do you violently disagree? Let us know in the comments. We do read the comments. We will respond on there. Or if you're out walking the dog or evading your KGB tail, or maybe you think you've seen Joubert and you're listening to the podcast right now, use your podcast app, leave a comment, review, or best still, come and join us all in the Spybury Facebook community, which you can find at spybury.com/community, where we have conversations like this every single day. Gentlemen, thanks a million for coming on.
Thank you,
Thank
Shane.
you.
Thanks for listening to the Spybury podcast. You don't have to wait for the next episode. Join the conversation happening now at facebook.com/Spybury and on Twitter @Spybury.